Happy Sabbath. Good evening, church. I would like to invite those of you who are in the back to come a little more in the front. That way, your viewing as well as listening experience will be enhanced. And this afternoon, we have a very unique, beautiful presentation. As I mentioned this morning, a while ago, I received an email from one of my friends with a very intriguing title saying Seventh-day Beavers. And I said to myself, what could that be? And lo and behold, as soon as I watched the few minutes of the video, I realized that it was a very serious kind of material, documentary style, featuring the gentleman who is here with us tonight. And several months went by, and then I received an email from him saying, this is the work that I do. It just so happens that I will be in Loma Linda area around this time, as my daughter is your neighbor in the School of Dentistry, I believe? PT? Physical therapy. And so she lives in the dorms right up the hill from here. And so I said, wonderful, that would be a great opportunity for our church family to witness firsthand the beauty of God's creation as it had been observed and documented over a lengthy time by our brother here as well as his family. If I remember some clips, was it your daughter that had some parts commenting in? Why don't you come up here? All right. Go ahead. You have 5 daughters? Five children.
5 children.
Okay.
Man, I couldn't handle 5 daughters, but my one daughter is moving up to Walla Walla this weekend, so that hurts.
Well,
see her go. She's only 18. And then my other daughter was here. She's at a church outing right now, and she won't be back till maybe 7:38. But she's, in the physical therapy assistant program, living at Lindsay Hall.
Beautiful. Well, you know the thing with Walla Walla. Everybody who goes to Walla Walla eventually ends up here. So it's just a matter of time before, whether or not they go via Georgia, but, one way or the other, they end up here.
My wife went to Walla Walla, and she ended up here. She graduated here, too. I graduated here. So.
Oh, you did? In what field?
Physical therapy assistant.
Physical therapy.
95.
So your daughter is taking after
you. She's doing the same thing. I retired from that a long time ago. But
tell us a little about how this idea of observing this unique kind of industrious and brilliant architects, the Beavers. How did you come up with this idea?
That's part of the story tonight, so maybe I shouldn't,
Don't give it away.
That is a key part of the story, so the testimony, basically. So,
are there a lot of beavers in the area where you live?
Where I live in Modoc County, and there are few of anything there. Okay. There's more animals than people. It's the most sparsely populated county in California, I think. We have 1 or 2, maybe 2 people per square mile, 70% national forest, and, we're one of the people that live there, one of the families.
When was the first time you came across this idea of animals having a very holy habit of resting?
Never even crossed my mind at all, but I will share a little bit tonight where the idea came from, and it actually did come from when I was living here in Redlands.
Oh, wow.
And it was before I was even religious, and so...
there was a time when you were not religious.
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, but I drifted away from God, became, unfortunately, an atheist with the atheistic mindset, and through some awesome circumstances, God revealed himself to me. It was really studying anatomy and physiology, and then later I came to Loma Linda and took gross anatomy here, and it was through all that process that I understood that there was an intelligent designer that designed the human body, without a doubt.
Now, I have to say, I haven't talked to Brother Cole about these details before, so this is news to me. I'm happy to hear that science played a very beautiful role in you getting to know God. My first exposure to science was in the field of physics, and it was through that science, that discipline, that I've learned about God in a way that probably I would not have experienced God in any other way. To those who may be spending a lot of time indoors, what do you say to them?
Get outdoors. There's a whole world of nature out there, you don't see so much here. You know, when we were looking to move to the country, we felt convicted, and I'll share some of that too, but it's hard to find country in San Bernardino County. It really is. I mean, there's a few horses out there in San Mateo Canyon, and we were, you know, it's just hard to get out, and the Lord moved us out. Maybe that's not where He's moving everybody else, but that's where He moved us. And I travel a lot. You know, I'm a full-time evangelist, so I'm all over the place. And we do mostly weekend seminars, but we do full-length Revelation seminars, so I'm everywhere. So I don't get cooped up too bad in the rural living atmosphere that I'm in.
How effective is this form of God's revelation, creation? How effective is it in appealing to people who may be in their life journey just as skeptical as you might have been at one point?
Well, you know, nature is God's second book, and it appeals to people in a different way. To some minds that won't receive a knock on the door, a Bible study offer, they do receive. In some cases, they'll receive a nature documentary, and we have a whole system where we share these door to door. I went with my pastor not long ago. We went door to door, sharing the Seventh Day Beaver DVD and handing out a documentary survey with it, asking for Bible studies, and it's phenomenal. It'll be received by people who won't naturally receive a Bible study offer.
Well, we cannot wait to hear about the stories that the Lord had revealed to you, also the stories that you've encountered in your evangelistic work. And with that in mind, I want to allow you to have all the time possible. Let us bow our heads for a short prayer. Dear Lord, it is a privilege to be in your presence. It is a great happiness to have our brother Larren call with us this afternoon and his son. We thank you for the beauty that you have revealed to him outside in the nature, and we are eager to partake of that discovery as he's sharing it with us. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And hello, church. I want to say thank you for that awesome potluck today. That was a wonderful meal, and I was very encouraged by the church service. I was encouraged by the music song, the selections of music that you chose today were really encouraging. I really appreciated that, and I appreciated Pastor Mark's sermon, Disappointment, His Appointment. That was awesome. That was wonderful, and I learned a lot. And so I want to thank the church for inviting us here, and Pastor Christian so much for that. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to be so close to my daughter, and she's over there, and she's the star of our family. Really, she's like a jewel, and so, as is Alex, my son, but it's good to, any chance I get to be with my daughter, I'm so happy to do that and take advantage of that. In fact, I've been here like off and on for about 5 weeks as her study partner in gross anatomy. She was struggling a little bit in gross anatomy, and I've been through that. I've passed it, so I came down and I offered to be her study partner, and by God's grace, she passed. She finished, and so that was exciting. But my name is Larren Cole, as Christian has said. I'm the speaker and the director for a small Seventh-day Adventist supporting ministry called Desire Media. Desire Media, of course, does film production. And we have a number of presentations that we offer for free and are airing on Amazing Facts Television, Three Angels Broadcasting Network, even Loma Linda Broadcasting Network, some, and a number of other networks in different languages. The Seventh-day Beaver is anyway. And so that's one aspect. Another aspect of our ministry is we have a free online Bible school. And that goes along with our free public evangelistic series called Revelation 101. And I have at least 2 more of those seminars scheduled in California and in Oregon to round out the end of this year. But that's kind of what I do. And you can see by the title of do we have the PowerPoint up on the screen? The title, this presentation about the Seventh-day Beavers is actually part of a seminar series called Animals and People That Rest on Saturday. I'm passionate about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and so I do a lot of research on the Adventist Church, and I'm encouraged by everything I learn about it. Here's a picture of my wife. This is Mickey, my dear wife. I met her here at Loma Linda University, and she was a student. And I bet you nobody here could guess where I actually met her. You might think that it might be in in chapel or a grocery store or, typical laundromat, but it wasn't any of those. Are you going to try to guess? No, it wasn't. That's a good guess, because that's a good place to meet a spouse. Oh, in a bar. That was a bad guess. but I bet you'd never guess this. This is where I met my wife, Hughes Mortuary. Now, I know that, now this is not the Hughes Mortuary that was on campus here. Do you remember Hughes Mortuary that used to be here? Okay, that's gone now, right? Okay, well, that's where I met my wife, is Hughes Mortuary. Hughes Mortuary used to house 2 physical therapy students. They were there in order to pick up the clients that were needed. They were there, they got free rent, and their job was to pick up the clients necessary. But I was down visiting one of the tenants there, and when I got there to visit, I found out that my spouse-to-be, Mickey, was visiting the other roommate, the roommate of the guy I was visiting. And when I got there, I was no longer interested in visiting the person I came to. I saw my wife, Mickey, to be, and I wanted to visit her. She had that glowing halo around her, and all the lights were green, and I couldn't see anybody else. I was glued on her. I wanted to visit her. At the time, I was in the car business at that time, used car business. I had a car dealership in Bakersfield, and in my inventory, which I drove up there, was a white, now remember this, a white 325i BMW with 2 doors. It was a 5-speed, and it had a sunroof. So when I went in there and I saw Mickey, she was visiting the other student there, and I started talking. I wanted to get to know her. So I said, I found out she was 2 weeks away from graduating from the dental hygiene program. And so I thought, that's pretty interesting. I said, Mickey, what's the first thing you're going to do when you graduate? She said, well, I'm going to go out and get a job, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy a white 325i BMW with a 5-speed, 2 doors, and a sunroof. And I thought she was kidding, but she did not see what I had just driven up in that BMW. She did not see that. And so I knew that was something set up from God. That had to be from God. And so I didn't end up selling her that car, as you can imagine. I ended up giving her that car. And here's Mickey on our honeymoon in the white BMW. We're at the Silverado Country Club in Napa Valley. And we got married. We got married in the University Church. And here we are on our honeymoon, and that's Mickey in her new car, gave it to her. We ended up selling that car later on to help pay for my school bill, which was in physical therapy. And so that was providential. I actually retired from physical therapy in 2002, and I no longer do that. I started a ministry called Desire Media at that time. I wanted my children to be involved in ministry work, and so we started that. And we started making a book and video series about the desire of ages, the life of Christ. It wasn't in children's language at the time, so I wanted it in children's language. So we made videos. We had children's church presentations at the church. We involved all the children, and we had these little books. I got 5 books done before I ended up getting so busy. The Oregon Conference called me into speaking, traveling for them, and so many things happened. So we kind of branched out from that, and we started doing other video presentations and things like that. I also started a business at the same time. It was a nursing registry. And in 2008, the economy did something unusual. Do you remember that? I see a lot of unhappy, kind of disgusted looks on some people's faces. So a lot of you remember that the economy really tanked in 2008. And so with it, our business, which was a nursing registry, it sort of collapsed. No longer was there a need for nursing registries. And so our business imploded, and we had made a lot of money up to this point. We were really doing well. God was really blessing us. We had a mission fund, and we were supporting ministries all over the world. And all of a sudden, that was gone. It was just yanked out from under us. And at the same time as that started to shrink, our little ministry started growing. In 2009, we were called into evangelism in the Gulf states, and we started presenting evangelistic series in the Gulf states. In 2011, a tornado came and went through our property, and it destroyed our neighbors, it destroyed our property. It just really discouraged us from living in the Gulf states, in Alabama, which it was. Here's a picture we took off of our camera after the day after our tornado. These are our neighbors. Their homes were devastated. And there I am driving our expedition. Look, we just couldn't believe it. All the power was out. We had no idea it was a tornado. We just knew it was a bad storm that took out all our power and all our water, all our electricity, our internet. Everything was gone for about a week. Motorhomes upside down. Some of our neighbors died. power lines all over the place, and it was a real mess. My wife decided that we're no longer eligible to live in Alabama. She says, let's go back to California. We're out of here. And so we were back to California. As soon as I got here back to California in 2011, my father passed away, and we got his little estate settled. And as soon as it was settled, the Oregon Conference called and started asking us, how much do you charge for your evangelistic series? And I told them, well, I was thinking to myself, charge? I was about to say, I don't charge anything, because we didn't charge. We did this all for free. We paid out of our pocket to do evangelism. But at this time, a little voice told me, you need to charge something, because we were out of money by now. And a little voice said, you need to charge something. So before I could say I don't charge anything, the number 3,000 just jumped out of my mouth. And the guy on the phone said, good, well, book us for March. And so we were booked in our first evangelistic crusade out here in Oregon. And as soon as I hung up the phone, about an hour later, another conference church called, and they said, how much do you charge for your evangelistic series? I said, where are these people coming from? How did they know? I didn't advertise. And I had that number, 3,000. They said, good, put us down for March. I said, well, we already have March. How about April? We'll do April then. So then we did that one, and then we did 3 or 4 other ones that same year. People kept calling, and we were on the road. We were filming other people's evangelistic crusades, and ever since then we've been extremely busy. And this started happening, baptisms, and this is what really makes it joyful to do the work that I do, meeting different people and presenting the gospel, making appeals, and watching people make decisions for Jesus. That is the most awesome feeling, and I've been hooked ever since. And so that's what I do, and that's kind of a little brief history of me. But tonight we're going to be talking about the Seventh-day Beavers. How many of you have actually seen or heard of it? Anybody? It's kind of unusual to come to a place where they haven't heard of it. I've traveled around the United States, and there's at least a fourth of the congregations that have seen it. But it's interesting that we come down to Southern California, and very few people have actually even heard of it. Well, just real quickly, here is a video trailer that we first produced, and I think we do have sound. It's just about a minute long, and this is kind of how we started the whole documentary. It all started when we moved out of the city. We moved way up here, way up to this remote area by the Modoc National Forest. Here, I discovered this really neat beaver colony. I was so excited by this close encounter with nature that I started to film with a video camera. That's when I made a remarkable observation. These beavers were out and about every day of the week except Saturdays. I was never able to get any pictures on Saturdays. So I decided to do a little study. The incredible results I want to share with you in this documentary I call The Seventh-Day Beavers. So it was July of 1999 that we made the big move. We were living in Loma Linda. We had our first 2 children. We had Alex and we had Madison. We were living somewhere up there in Loma Linda in a tract housing development. And we moved to the country in 1999. Why did we do that? Well, I found a book over in the ABC bookstore, and I was looking for a book to help be a better parent. You know, there's a lot of good advice that we could use, and so while I was in there, I found a book called Country Living. Now, this silly little book almost jumped off the shelf by itself into my arms, and it's a small little book about my size. It's about 36 pages. I can read that, and I picked it up there right in the bookstore, and I started reading, and I read, and I was convinced that God wanted us to move and take our family to the country. And so we started looking around, and like I told Pastor Christian, we were looking for country. We went out to San Mateo Canyon, and we looked out there, and we found some horse property, and the Lord started miraculously shutting doors. A house would be for sale, and we would go in there, and we'd call the realtor, and the realtor would say, that's funny, I just got an offer on that. That thing's been on the market for 5 years, and no one's touched it, and as soon as you call, 5 minutes ago, somebody else called to make an offer on it. And that happened probably, I would say, at least 10 times. We would call, and some house would be taken off the market miraculously. And so we were praying, and the Lord said, no, I want you to move out of the city and move way out in the country. He had something prepared for us. And so after we made the full commitment to do this, all of a sudden a free house was offered to us. And it was right here. That's that free house. Not much to look at. It's sort of a permitized mobile home, but it's way up in Modoc County, which is the extreme northeastern corner of California. Way up there. And it was free, and I thought, well, this can't be from the Lord because it's so far from people. There's no people up there. Like I mentioned, one person per square mile. And we need jobs. We had debts, and we had school loans, and we needed work. Where would we find work up here? Well, there was one hospital. It was about 35 miles away. It was Alturas, California, a little tiny little hospital. And I just on a whim, I called them up, and I said, listen, I'm wondering if I'm looking for work. I'm a physical therapist. I want to work 4 days a week, and 4 instead of 5 because my wife is a dental hygienist. She wants to work that other day while we take turns staying home with the kids. The man on the phone paused for a second, and then he came back on. He thought I was joking, too. He said, are you serious? Did you say dental hygiene 1 day and physical therapy 4 days? I said, yeah. He said, that's funny. We're looking for a dental hygienist to work 1 day a week and a physical therapist to work 4 days a week. And so all the doors and all the lights were green, and the Lord moved us up to that house right there, it was free. That's about all we could afford at the time. It was free. And what a contrast from this area, from San Bernardino County, and I love San Bernardino County, especially the people. The people, I don't like the crowds and the traffic out there too much, but I do love the people, more than most any people I've probably met around the United States. But what a contrast from moving from here and up to it was like a complete opposite. The first morning, when we moved into that house, we went to bed and it was deathly quiet. We heard coyotes and we heard whatever kind of beasts were out there. There was all kinds of wild animals and beasts out there, but no people, no cars. And we were awakened early in the morning to guess what? This is what woke us up in the morning, the first morning we were there. It was a cattle drive in our yard. And this is typical. I just shot this out of my window just a little while ago. That's our neighbor. That's one of our neighbors, and that's what goes up and down the road by where we live. That's how remote we are. It's cattle country. It's the wild, wild west. So I don't know what the population density here. I think it's around 400 people per square mile, maybe in Riverside County, which is a little denser than. Are you in Riverside or San Bernardino? You're in San Bernardino? Well, we moved from that. We moved to the one person per square mile, and we actually fell in love with it. My wife is getting a little tired of the snow right now, but we loved things like the mountains. The mountains were our favorite part. Here's our family up in the country. There we are, my wife, some of the other kids. I have 5 of them. There's my son Jackson being baptized in a creek nearby. That's the Beaver Creek, actually. Here I am up in a place called Dismal Swamp. We're doing a little film documentary called High Elevation. It's about country living. 7,200 feet up there. It's anything but dismal, but that's what it's named. It's just beautiful country, and it's quiet. Wildlife everywhere is just amazing. Beavers, that's another thing we really appreciated. We found beavers up there. And Pastor Christian asked, whatever gave me the idea to even investigate the idea that maybe a beaver would be resting on a Saturday? Whatever gave me the idea? Well, it was this guy right here. His name is Bill. When we lived here in Redlands, we lived out on Mission Road when the orange trees were still there. You know where Mission, it goes, parallels Barton Road, I guess, over here, and it ends up at California Avenue, and right at the end of California Avenue is Loma Linda Broadcasting Network, and Kuka's, yum. Kuka's is over there, and before all that was even there, we were living in the little old house. It's gone now, and it was surrounded by orange trees. There was a little 6-acre place marked out there, and to offset our rent, we were really creative. We renovated the garage, and we made it into an apartment, and we rented it to Bill. And Bill was our tenant, and he offset some of our rent. One day, while I was just walking by Bill's little apartment, he was sitting out on the patio with his lawn chair out there, and he said, "Hey, Larren, I got to tell you something." He said, "Do you notice all these bees here? They're flying around here, and these orange groves everywhere." He said, "There's something really interesting. every day when I sit out here at the same time, I see the bees go zooming by my garage every single day. He said, but on Friday night and Saturday all day, there was no bees here. I never see a bee out on Friday night and Saturday. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. It didn't really mean much to me at the time because I wasn't really religious too much at the time. I was sort of coming around, but I wasn't I wasn't in ministry for sure. But I remember what he said. It was interesting, but didn't mean too much to me at the time. And when we moved up to the country, up there in Modoc County, and since I didn't work on Saturdays, I had time to explore the mountains. On which day do you suppose I explored the mountains? We call those Saturday or Sabbath afternoon walks, don't we? We took tons of those. On Sabbath after church, we'd be up in the mountains exploring the beautiful nature up there. It's amazing. You don't pay anything to go anywhere in the national forest. Here I think you have to pay everywhere you park, and there's people everywhere. There's nobody up there. And there is just acres and acres of beautiful roads and creeks and rivers and ponds and things like that, and wildlife, bears and mountain lions. Anyway, so I'm up there. I'm up there enjoying my Sabbath afternoon walks, and one day I discovered a beaver dam. And I thought, this is heaven. This is amazing. A beaver dam. I'm having a close encounter with nature. And so I came up there again and again on Sabbath afternoons, again and again, hoping I would see the beavers, and I'd always go up on Saturdays. Here's a picture of the beaver, one of the beaver lodges, our beaver dams. And there's one of our subject beaver dams that we were studying. And there I am looking on a Saturday, and of course I never saw anything. I just saw the handiwork. I figured that beavers were just reclusive, sneaky creatures, and people had hard times seeing them. Maybe Marlin Perkins could see them, or those nature people. You remember Marlin Perkins? People like that that are skilled at this kind of thing would see them, but I never saw them. I thought it was normal. But then I got a surprise. One Sunday, I had a chance to go back up there. I was off work, and I went up there, and I got a surprise, and I visited on a Sunday, and there they were. The beaver, I couldn't believe it. I went up to the beaver dam, and see up in the upper left-hand corner, there's one of my little seventh-day beavers up there. And there he is, but don't know what he's doing. He's just out there chewing things and working on something, and another one swimming in the pond there, and I couldn't believe it. There's the beavers. I was so excited about this. That next Sabbath, guess what I had scheduled for the whole family to do? Go up to the beaver lodge. We're going to go see some beavers. I know they're out there. I saw them now, and I marked the time I saw them. So I brought the family back up there on Saturday, and there's no beavers. And I waited, and there was nothing. And then a pattern sort of developed. I got a chance to go on a non-Sabbath day again, and I went up there, and there they were again. And then I bring the kids back on Sabbath, nothing. And the pattern started to develop, and I started to think, and I never would have noticed this if it wasn't for Bill. Remember Bill's and his bees? I started thinking, wait a minute, I wonder if these beavers are acting like Bill's bees. Bill told me about these bees that flew around every day of the week except for Saturday. I thought, well, wait a minute, bees and beavers are kind of similar, aren't they? I mean, in that they're working animals, aren't they? Bees work in colonies to make beehives and produce honey and those kind of things. They work together. They're very constructive. Beavers are the exact same thing. They're a working class animal, kind of like ants, where they work in colonies to build lodges and dams. They engineer landscaping and they make ponds. I don't know how they do that, but God programmed an amazing instinct. So I thought to myself, I wonder if these working animals are behaving like Bill said his bees were behaving. And so I decided to have a little fun. I took my 8mm camera. Of course, this is not an 8mm camera here, but back in those days, it was 8mm film, and this is one of our Desire Media cameras, but that we use now. But back then, I got my little 8mm camera, and I thought I'm going to have the most interesting experiment and find out if these things are resting on Saturdays. And so I decided to set up some parameters for my observational study. I thought, well, I'm going to come out when I can. I'm going to come out before work for a few hours and after work for a few hours. And when the sun goes down, then I'll go home and I'll come and do it every time I go to work. I'm going to come out there. I'm going to spend a few hours, or at least an hour in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, and I'm just going to observe and see what I see. And so I found out after just a few days, after at least the first week, that these were not morning beavers. These beavers never came out in the morning, but they were always active in the afternoon, almost always in the late afternoon. And so that was good for me, because then I didn't have to get up so early and be late. I was late to work so much because of this experiment. But so I set up I'm going to come out morning and afternoon, and later I drop the morning. I'm going to just experiment. I set up little blinds. I set up little spaces to watch. And I'm just going to observe. I'm not going to interact with them. I'm just going to observe and see what I see. So I started on a Monday, and sure enough, the beavers were out. And I found out beavers can't see. It's easy. You don't really have to hide from the beavers. You only have to hide from they can smell and hear really well, but they can't see worth anything. So it's easy to set up a little blind there and just sort of observe what they do. And sure enough, Monday, there they were. Tuesday, all the way through Friday, I saw activity every day of the week. And then the next day, of course, was Saturday. And this was the big day of the experiment, a solemn moment. I came out there, same time. I expected fully to see them out. I did not believe that there's something going on with. I couldn't even believe my experiment, really. It was hard to believe what I'm seeing, so I'm documenting all this with data and with my video camera. But this solemn moment, I came out and there was no beavers. And I waited and I waited, and I had all day on Sabbath, so I'm out there waiting, and I wondered if they were dead. The first thing I thought was, are my beavers dead? And even one time, I think it was the second Sabbath, I went out there I snuck up to the lodge. You can see a picture here, and this is actually on the video, the documentary. I wondered if they were dead. So I took my little camera, and I went up and I snuck up to the lodge, and I put my ear to the lodge, and I was happy to hear these sounds inside the lodge. This is actually the audio coming from the camera, just listening to what's going on a Sabbath inside the lodge. Doesn't that sound like a little Bible study with the potluck going on? And so I'm listening, and I was so relieved to know that the beavers are alive. And that was actually a mother beaver with a couple of little babies in there. And they're in there. They're not sleeping or anything. They're chewing. I can hear them chewing in there. They wouldn't come out of their lodge, but they were chewing. They're alive, and that was relieving. I was very happy to know that they're alive. So I waited. They never came out. And then, so I went back to my routine on Sunday. Now, Sunday was the very next day, and I went back out there, and there they were. I took boat out this time. I went out there, and you can see I'm staring down a little beaver here. That's a mother beaver, and she's looking at me. She thinks she's looking at me, and she really can't see very well, and so she's wondering what that little hazy little thing is over there, but that happens all the time. I'm staring. I got beavers so close to me. They come up, they can't see. I almost run into them. And I'm kind of scared sometimes because it looks like they're going to bite. But Sunday, if you must know, is actually the busiest day of the week for the Beaver Lodge where I was observing. I wonder why that is. Can you take a guess? Yeah, and I don't know that to be true, but I observed that Sunday was the busiest day at the lodge. Saturday was a nothing, and Sunday was a little busier than normal. If you want to come up and have a chance to see some of these beavers, and you want to go with me, I would recommend Sunday to go. And you can come on Saturday just to double check to make sure that, in fact, I was just up there, I go running or riding my bike through this area, right behind this pond here. I ride my bike there, and I always glance over, and there they are. They're usually there in the evening. But Sunday is the busiest day of the week. Well, I went back to my routine Monday, and I got the same results. Sunday through Friday, out and about, busy. And then next Sabbath, I went back, another solemn Sabbath again. I went back up there, nothing, just quiet. And I spent an inordinate amount of time, much more time than I did on the weekdays, on Saturdays, observing beavers. Saturday, if you must know, was the boringest day up in the woods where I live. You know, I don't see a lot of animals of any kind. We used to have, when my children were little, we'd go on what we called Friday night bear hunts. Because there's bears up there. You know, I take the kids out, and we get our pajamas on. We'd have our evening worship, and I'd take the kids up, and we'd go way up four-wheeling, where only a four-wheel drive could get, and we'd park, and we'd crack the windows, and I'd tell the kids we're looking for bears. And we'd never found a bear on Friday night. But we had fun trying. Remember that, Alex? Did you like Friday night bear hunts? We still do those. Even though he's 24 years old now, we still do it sometimes. So week after week, this continued on, month after month, summer and winter. To this day, I've never observed them out of their lodge on a Saturday. Now, my first year of observation was intense. The first part of the year, intense. And the second year was tapering off a little bit. It was more of what I'd call casual observation. But it was consistent. And several years down the road, it was just casual. But it was month after month, same results. Never saw them come out on a Sabbath. And then in 2013, I felt impressed. And this is 13 years later. The experiment started in 2000. 13 years later, I'm still observing the same thing, and I felt impressed that I should document this. I want to kind of put this chapter behind my life, but before I do so, we have cameras, we have helpers, we have people that can do this, and I thought to myself, this might be a good idea. And I prayed about it, and I felt impressed that the Lord would like me to do this. In fact, the answer to my prayer in my own little mind, the thought came to me, well, if you decide to do this, I'll bless it, but it's going to be a lot of work. And it really was. It hogged my time drastically. I mean, it was just, I don't know if my family really didn't suffer because they were involved in much of the observation. So it was 2013 that we started it. It took 3 years to film the presentation. And it was, like I said, in 2013 when I felt impressed. Somebody else was praying also. A person named Louis, I found out later, in Florida. I'm going to share a little bit more about Louis' testimony in just a little bit. But remember that name, Louis in Florida. Like I said, my whole family was involved. Our technical producer is my son. He's not here. It's Alex's younger brother, which is Jackson. Now, Jackson is gifted, like Alex. They're very gifted with computers and cameras. But this one here, I don't know what happened to him, what kind of mutant gene he got, because he is an app developer for Apple, and he just, without any really training, I don't know where he got his training, but he develops apps. He had the number one selling app in France. It was called No Location. By the way, if you want a nice to take the location finding device off your phone when you take pictures, he developed an app called No Location. And he's got another one called, was it No 140, where you can tweet more than 140 characters? Anyway, I think the No Location one has been the best-selling app in Europe many times. And anyway, he was born in the year just before the year 2000 started, the exact time that I started the experiment with the Seventh-day Beavers. I would take him in a backpack I'd wear a backpack, and I'd put him in the backpack, and Alex could walk, and we'd go up there, and we would spend hours, just hours and hours, hiking up and down, filming beavers, observing beavers. He was in that backpack so long, he got a nickname, and his nickname was Packer. And so if you can ever meet Jackson, you can just say, hey, Packer, how's it going? So we learned a lot of neat things about beavers. Beavers, like I said, they have extremely poor eyesight, which helps a lot when you want to get close-up pictures. The beavers, they'll come right up there. They can't see. As long as you're downwind, you can get really close to a beaver. Found out that they can hold their breath for 15 minutes. When a beaver submerges, it's usually, you could almost set your watch by these beavers, it would be 15 minutes before they would come up. So we would have little places where cameras were, like here I am in a camera in a boat. There's a dam over there where there's another camera. Alex is on a camera somewhere sometimes. And as soon as they would get sort of a wind that we might be looking, and they get afraid, they'd slap their tails, they would submerge. And we could stand up, we could walk around, we look at our clocks. 15 minutes later, remember that, Alex? About 14 minutes and 30 seconds, we would have to hunker down, get ready, because then they would submerge. Right about 15 minutes. They'd come back up. They would think the coast was clear, and so they would go back to whatever they're doing, swimming and hauling trees around and things like that. Their poor eyesight leads to a very important question. Why do beavers slap their tails? What have you heard? Did you read Benny the Beaver? Anybody? Now that's an Adventist publication, I think, but maybe some of you are too young. I'm really dating myself. Benny the Beaver is an old, but none of you old-timers know that, huh? Benny the Beaver? Anyway, we were taught that beavers slap their tails because they're warning other beavers of danger. Now take a look here. I got a little film clip of some beavers slapping their tail. Notice what happens each time a beaver slaps his tail. What is he doing? He's submerging instantly, isn't he? He submerges instantly. So my theory, after watching him for 16 years, because of their poor eyesight, what I believe is happening is that beavers, since they can't see very well, they sense danger. They smell something, they may hear something, but they're not sure, so what they want to do is submerge quickly before whatever, the boogeyman out there, the red-tailed hawk or whatever, before it gets them, they want to submerge and get underwater quickly. Warning others. Sometimes they'll slap their tail when there's nothing around, no other beavers around. When I'm not around, sometimes I'm actually looking for my beavers and I can't find them, and I'll hear a slap behind me. Oh, they're over here. And they just give themselves away. And so now watch what happens, for instance. Here's another clip. Right in the middle, Mother Beaver is out in the middle. Alex is up in the upper right screen here with a camera. That is we're looking through. This is going out. And so I'm on this camera. Alex is up in the red shirt over there. Mother Beaver is just sitting out there. Daddy Beaver just swam around the back of those reeds back there. And let me play that again, and you can hear him go around the corner and slap his tail. Let's see if we can. Now listen when he slaps his tail. Now watch what the reaction from Mother Beaver when the tail is slapped. Now she flinched because she heard it, but it wasn't a warning there's danger, because you see her flinch and then she just relaxed. She's just thinking, oh, that's just Daddy. He's just, he's freaking out over there. He thinks he saw the boogeyman. And so she flinched, but she didn't go under. And that always happens. When the beaver slaps his tail, he's trying to submerge quickly because he's not sure if danger is there. Just in case there is danger, I better get underwater where it's safe. And it is safe underwater. Here's a picture of Alex. He is the Desire Media General Manager. He takes care of all these little engagements, and he takes care of this and that. And he's a real blessing. But he did spend a lot of time on this film, didn't you, Alex? Are you sick of beavers like me? I'm kind of tired of watching beavers, but it was sure a lot of fun. He makes a mention, if you get the DVD, you'll see that Alex he has a really interesting spot on this, where he talks about how after studying this for years, and in fact, we were filming for 3 years. We're in our 3rd year of filming. And every time we go out on a Sabbath, he said, we're a little worried. What happens if after all this time of not seeing beavers out on Sabbath, what happens if we go out there and all of a sudden they apostatize and come out? What happens to our film and all that work? Thousands of dollars were invested into this film. What happens if that happened? Well, he said, that would really ruin the documentary, wouldn't it? And he said, but every single time, and he makes the case, every single time we go out there, we faithfully go out there, a little worried on Sabbath, but we go out there and we spend that time, 6 hours on Sabbath. Many times, 6 hours out there on Sabbath, never see them out, never see the beavers out. And since the film aired in 2016, we started receiving testimonies from other people who had similar experiences but had never really noticed them. For instance, who's the lady that wrote the 10 Talents cookbook? Rosalie Hurd, good friend and good supporter of our ministry, who actually supported this film. She wrote, for 30 years we took Sabbath walks by a beaver settlement in Minnesota. Our walks were always on Sabbath. However, we never saw a beaver, only the results of their working during the week. It did not dawn on us to go back during the week to see if we could find those busy beavers at work. Now, after viewing this documentary, the puzzle pieces have clearly come together. The beaver colony we saw were apparently Sabbath keepers too. And I know a lot of people will call them Sabbath keepers. Now, I don't call them Sabbath keepers necessarily. Maybe that might be in my opinion, but the only claim I ever really make about these is that I never see them out of their lodge on Saturdays. Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown, I see them up right after sundown. They'll come right up. Like clockwork sometimes. Right after sundown, I've seen them come up. But I never make the claim that they're keeping the Sabbath, which they may be, but I don't think animals really keep the Sabbath. But I never saw them come out of their lodge on a Saturday. Here is something that we're done with now. This is our film vehicle. It's a 1995 Chevy Tahoe. We call it the Beaver Mobile, and it got us in and out of a lot of tough places, rough terrain where we had to go to find these remote critters. Here's one of our flat tires. This terrain really tears up tires. We went through, I think, 11 flat tires, and that was kind of an expensive budgetary item. But And anyway, we finally got those, what do you call those tires? We got rubber tires. Yeah, we got some rubber ones. We got those TA radial, Goodrich TA 10-ply radials. We thought that will fix the problem. First day, we're driving out there, we got a flat. We ran over, somebody dropped a needle-nose pair of pliers, and it actually drove the thing right through the tire. And but after that was the last flat we got. That kind of fixed it. Hundreds of testimonies. Now, since this started airing, and since the orders started coming in for this documentary, we started getting testimonies that were kind of encouraging. Here's one. It was this video that convinced me of God's Sabbath. We found that people are actually coming into the Seventh-day Adventist Church and discovering the Seventh-day Adventist Church because of this documentary film. Like Louis. I mentioned Louis earlier. Here's one from Louis. Now, this is Louis' testimony. He said, "It was by no coincidence that I stumbled upon this video. I have been searching for years to find out if beavers worked on the Sabbath." Now, this is just, I didn't solicit this or nothing. He just contacted me and told me this, to find out if beavers worked on Sabbath. I would never even thought of this. "I've searched for at least 3 years." He said, "Thank you again." He said, "I searched the internet for 3 years, starting in 2013. He said he was praying and he's searching. He was wondering which day was the true Sabbath. He thought, if any animal, this is what he was thinking, if any animal would observe it, it would be a beaver. So in 2013, he started searching. It was by no coincidence that in 2013 I was impressed to produce a documentary about this. Maybe that was the cue. Maybe God was saying, hey, there's a fella out there in Florida. He's kind of interested. This might be helpful to him. I've searched the internet for 3 years, starting in 2013, to see if anybody watched beavers and studied them, and I always come up with no answers. There were times I even thought to go up into the areas where beavers live and watch them myself. But I have a day-to-day life and a family I have to support. So you can imagine how happy I was to find your study released in 2016 and that my assumption was correct. Now, since we posted these on our website, we've been getting orders by the hundreds to give these things. People are looking for good sharing witnessing tracts. Here's a little letter we got from a 3ABN viewer. Saw your program on 3ABN this morning. I've been praying for something I could do. This is the answer. Praise the Lord. Please send me 100 copies to start with. That was from a lady named Nell. And since then, we've had thousands and thousands of these things ordered. And people are giving them out like witnessing tracts. Other testimonies, somebody from Nancy from Texas, she said, we will be using your DVD to get in the door of our contacts after the Sabbath Bible Guide. I know it will bless our community. 6-year-old Jonathan. I did a seminar up in Helena, Montana, and I shared with little 6-year-old Jonathan. He wanted a Seventh-day Beaver DVD so he could go out and share them. Well, lo and behold, 6-year-old Jonathan shared the Seventh-day Beaver DVD with Baptist pastor Stephen Parker, which is on the right. And I came back a year later to do another seminar there. And I met Stephen Parker, and he said after watching it, said Stephen was baptized into the Adventist church just from watching the Seventh-day Beaver. He looked up all the texts, and he prayed about it, and he studied, and he joined the Seventh-day Adventist church. Actually married a Seventh-day Adventist there, too, a little bit later. I asked the Lord how to reach my neighbors since recently moving here. A couple of days later, I saw an interview of yours on one of the Hope channels, so I was impressed. This is the answer to my prayer. Shared your Seventh-day Beaver DVD with a neighbor who is now coming to church. Thank you for sharing this DVD with us. From Shirley. How absolutely wonderful. We have shared, it should be an ED, shared them to several people, including our Catholic priest next door. So glad for your research, Nelda. And here, Joan said, this DVD is a wonderful witnessing tool. Thank you for your patience and effort in what must have been very uncomfortable for you and your family at times. And then you have a picture of me being very uncomfortable there. And it was very uncomfortable, and it was a little disruptive to the family unit, but it turned out to be a blessing. It took an inordinate amount of time. Had a little week of prayer, and here a little I don't think she was Adventist, she was just attending the Adventist school. Dear Mr. Cole, thank you for talking about beavers. I really enjoy how the beavers stay in their lodges on Saturdays. Love, Covina. Cute little girl. And if you're ever looking for a way to share your faith with your Amish community, maybe you ought to try a Seventh-day Beaver DVD. Here is the family of Amish people. Right in the middle, we have a man by the name of Abe Raber, who used to be Amish, who is now Seventh-day Adventist. He said the major contributing factor to me finding the Adventist church was this video. And I just stumbled across him by chance because I was visiting the other Amish people who are all using the Seventh-day Beaver D at their church. Maybe some of you have heard of Andy and Naomi Weaver. Has anyone seen them on 3ABN or wherever, some of the Adventist networks? One of the things that they use to share is the Seventh-day Beaver DVD. That's one of their outreach tools, but it worked with Abe Raber, and it's worked with others. Now, why would anyone join a church after watching a nature documentary like this? Well, guess what? This nature film is actually not just a nature documentary. It's actually sprinkled with theology and with Bible text. We snuck that in there a little bit. In the video, we have 4 Bible experts. We have Jerry Bandy, which is actually my pastor. He's a world traveler, teaches around the world. He's in Europe for a while. And then some of you may recognize Steve Wahlberg. You may recognize Steve Wahlberg, okay? I worked with Steve Wahlberg as co-director for White Horse Media for 4 months. We merged our ministries for a while, and he helped a lot with the Seventh-day Beaver DVD during that time. And so he worked on it. And we have Shelley Quinn from 3ABN. She's a program developer. And some of you may know Dr. Neil Nedley. Dr. Neil Nedley is a researcher, a statistical researcher, and he was amazing on the film. Other people who agreed to be on the film who actually weren't on the film were Ty Gibson, Ron Clousset, and C.A. Murray, and a few others. But Ron Clousset was interesting. We had a little studio set up here in Spokane, Washington, and he had an appointment to be there, and he actually totally forgot about it, so that's why he's not in it. He just forgot. And I met him later after we were putting our cameras away. I said, what happened? Neil Nedley actually took his place. But we waited and waited. Ron never showed up, and then we decided, well, I think we have enough. We really don't need any more Bible experts anyway. So if God doesn't want us to have anybody else on the film, what we'll do, we'll pray about it, and we'll ask God. We're going to go back to our truck in the parking garage. We're going to put our cameras away, and that's it for Bible experts. And God, if you want us to have anybody else on the film, have us to run into them on the way to the parking garage. Amen. We got up off our knees from that prayer, opened the door, and I practically ran into Dr. Neil Nedley and heard a little voice saying, this is the person I want on the film. And I had not known Dr. Neil Nedley up to this point, and I just said, Dr. Nedley, you don't know me, but I'm producing a film called The Seventh-day Beavers, and I wondered if you would mind making a statement on that, on film for us. And he said, sure, I'd love to. So he sat down in front of our cameras, and he read the script that we had for him, and then he went off script, and he started spouting all these amazing statistics. You know, he studies depression recovery and stuff like that. He said that there was one study he was doing where they were studying a group of people who were resting on Saturday, another group that was resting on Sunday, and he said that there was a marked advantage for recovery for those that were resting on Saturday rather than on Sunday. And we filmed that. That's on the DVD. It's not on the TV version, but it is on the DVD, his research. And he shared many other things. So in the questions, there's three theological questions that were sort of asked and sprinkled into this documentary. And one of the questions the first question is, what's so special about Saturday that would cause something in nature to recognize it? And second question, does the Bible mention anything, anywhere, about an animal resting on Saturday? What's that? In fact, I ought to make this a quiz. Okay, let's think. Does the Bible mention, I'm going to give a free DVD away to anybody who can guess what animal. There is one animal mentioned in the fourth commandment, Exodus 20, and verses, okay, now if you're in King James, let's go with King James just to be fair. Cattle, who said cattle? You said cattle, so can I give you this? Can we give her that? I know somebody, all right, so I think she said it first. Oh, it's back here, okay, it wasn't you, it was her. You're welcome, Seventh-day Beaver DVD. This helps keep people awake, you know, you give away a prize now and then. So the Bible mentions in the fourth commandment, it mentions, you know, not your maidservant, your manservant, your son, your daughter, nor your cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates. You rest, everything in your jurisdiction rests, and you spend the time with the Lord. That's his day. But it's the cattle. Now, I think in Deuteronomy, the repeating of the Ten Commandments in chapter 5, you have the ox mentioned in most versions, but It's the cattle. And somebody else said ox. Well, that qualifies. That's good enough. If you insist on, I have some more Beaver DVDs up here. The third question, if Saturday is God's Sabbath day, why do Christians all over the world go to church on Sunday? Now that is the big question. That is the question that makes people think. And we have pretty decent answers here from our Bible experts. Here you can see, now this is Jerry Bandy. He's answering one of these questions. And this is our office in Lakeview, Oregon, and you can see that we spend a lot of money on our green screen equipment, don't we? So I see some pretty nice cameras here, but you know what? If you really want to learn to pinch some pennies, you got to talk to me. You know, I don't have any money, so that is a piece of 4x8 sheetrock, $12.95 over at the lumber store. I got some spray paint, some green spray paint, and that was about maybe $4 for the spray paint. Sprayed the thing down and stuck it up on the wall, and there was our green screen. You know, I think a lot of people might be proud of me, but it turned out pretty good. You know, my son Jackson and Alex, they were able to key it out really well and make it look pretty decent. And some of the answers that they give are not the little shallow answers. Some of the answers to that last question, for instance, included the key issue about the change of the Sabbath. And we bring up the Council of Laodicea in 364 A.D., where Bishop Eusebius, he cites this. And this is, I think this is Jerry Bandy who read this and answered the question and brings this out. All things whatsoever it was duty to do on the Sabbath, these we have transferred to the Lord's. Now, to my research, this is the first time in writing, at least, that I found legitimately that Sunday is referred to the Lord's Day. Has anyone, Pastor, have you, I know there's a guy called Billy Sun, no, it's another fellow out there, Justin Martyr. They sometimes cite Justin Martyr as calling it the Lord's Day, but I don't see that it's not documented well. But this, I think, is the first time it's documented as Sunday being called the Lord's Day. A lot of folks will go out and say, well, the disciples were keeping Sabbaths in the Bible, and right off the bat they were keeping Sunday. But you see that they weren't even calling it the Lord's Day until 364 and 365 A.D. And then Bishop Eusebius in the Council of Laodicea continues on by saying, now a command is that Christians must not Judaize by resting on Saturday, which indicates that they were resting on Saturday. And now it's prohibited. We're changing it to Sunday, and we're prohibiting Saturday. And that's key, and that is significant. For instance, Stephen Parker, this is something that worked in his mind. These are puzzles, pieces of the puzzle that brought him about and brought him to understand the truth about God's Sabbath. And Steve Wahlberg, he flushes out the idea of the gradualness, how gradual the change was. And so on and on, the documentary is sprinkled with these theological ideas, and that's what makes it such a good soul-winning item. Some of my favorite shots were things like this, the boat shots where you get the tail slap close to the boat. There's one of the beavers. He's coming out of his lodge. He's swimming through his channel. He's coming at me. He didn't see me. In this particular shot, he didn't see me. It took about 5 hours to get a shot set up like this. It takes at least 5 hours to get that to happen. And Alex is the one filming from this camera, and he's going right towards me. And he wouldn't even have seen me if it wasn't for that silly yellow paddle I had sticking out there. He might have got a little closer on that shot, but he came up there, and all of a sudden he realized something's not right here. You know, that poor eyesight, and he decided, well, just in case. You see that he swam away, and he went away and did the little tail slap. See, right there he realized, I don't know what that is, but it's not right. And he goes over here, and that's as far as he can go, and I better go. And down he goes. He's not warning others. He's trying to save himself. And that was a good call by that beaver. There was danger there, actually. How many of you think that beavers would be good pets? Shaking your heads? No. You know, actually, if you go online, you'll find, and I found from meeting people, that beavers actually do make decent pets. Here's a guy with 2 little baby beavers, and they're just as friendly as can be. And there's one that that's not something you normally do until you're sure they're tame, because they can bite harder than a pit bull. You know, they can chew down trees, but they're very friendly. And people who have had them as pets say that they make good pets, except for one problem. What do you think that one problem would be? Wood furniture. In fact, here's Bridget. her little pet beaver, she's actually a wildlife rehabber, and she's had a little guy named JB. JB was her little pet rescued beaver, and he's in the house there, and she loves him to death, except he's a big problem. There's the problem. He is chewing up the baseboards, and she said no to him, and he looks at her. So now he's going to make a dam with some of the stuff. They're just busy little animals. They want to work. They want to dam up something. They want to chew some wood down, and there's Bridget, and she said she's got to move. She's got to move him out. He can't stay here anymore because he's chewing up the house. What about other animals that rest? I get this question all the time, and I'm sure if I had a Q&A session, you would ask, what about other animals? Have you observed any other animals? Well, we did mention the bees, and that was right here. That was just Bill, his little observation. It was unprofessional, but it was an observation. It cued the study for the Seventh-day Beavers, at least. And so that was that bee little thing for Bill. But here is a little bit more of a legitimate study by Dr. Sang Lee. I don't know if anyone's heard of Dr. Sang Lee. I think he's a dentist. He goes to Brazil often, and he has some friends there who are beekeepers. And his friends there have told him and have been watching, observing their bees, their stingless bees in a remote area of Brazil, that they go into their hive and they stay in there during the Sabbath hours. They don't come out of their hive on the Sabbath hours. And he said he's observed that many times. In fact, if we do a follow-up documentary, which we're planning on doing if we get the funding, it's called Animals That Rest on Saturday, because we've got so many stories coming in. We're going to try to get out to see and meet this and document this, if this is indeed the case. But you heard the children's story this morning about Ivan and Lydia. I've heard people come tell me about their studies with hummingbirds and warblers. I've heard scientists, and I'll share this a little bit more about this later, but doctors who do researchers, scientists. There was also Gary Roberts. I don't know if you've heard of Adventist Aviation. He tells a story about the Seventh-day Adventist Dog. Have you heard that one? I think that was a Mission Spotlight one quarter. Seventh-day Adventist Dog, an amazing story. There was a Pepsi commercial that used an elephant that would not do work on Saturday. And maybe many of you have heard of the Seventh-day Ox. Have you heard of the Seventh? That's where we were inspired with the name Seventh-day Beavers. Here in our DVD, our documentary, we actually do a little 3-minute expose on the Seventh-day Ox. Would you like to see that little 3-minute segment? Okay, here's the Seventh-day Ox little, what I call an expose that I did on this.
Nikolai Panchuk was a Christian pastor who got sentenced to a Siberian prison for hard labor. Nikolai was a faithful Sabbath keeper, which meant he wouldn't work on Saturdays. This got him into all kinds of trouble at the prison camp. Each time he refused to work on Saturdays, he was confined inside a small wooden box for 10 days. Now, this nearly killed him, yet he still remained faithful to his convictions about the Sabbath. After being confined in the box several times, Nikolai was finally able to make a bargain with one of the wardens. Here's the deal he was offered. If he could get all his week's work done in 6 days, he could have Saturdays off. Unfortunately, he was given the job of hauling water for the camp. He was to drive an ox with a cart all the way down to the spring to draw water, then haul it back up to the camp. The problem was with the ox. The ox was stubbornly slow, and the more he tried to motivate the beast, the slower it would go. So he was constantly behind on his work, and by Thursday, he was so far behind schedule that it looked impossible to get his 7 days' worth of work done in only 6. But when Friday came, something unusual happened. The ox could hardly wait to get to work, and as soon as it was hitched up to the cart, it started to run. To and from the spring, it continued running all day long, so that just before the sun set on Friday, Nikolai got all the water hauled for the entire week, and he got Saturday off. This continued every week. The ox would be slow Sunday through Thursday, but it would run on Friday. And even after Nikolai Panchuk was released from prison, the ox continued the same pattern each week with the new prison worker.
Some of you have read that story. I've read the story about that, and that's an amazing story, isn't it? And so here we were able to get some footage from CBC Moscow, from an actual prison in Siberia, a labor camp that had closed down. And you see the person playing Nikolai Panchuk was meeting with a former warden. I mean, just perfectly set for this story. And so we used that footage. Our closing scenes, as you can see where I live and where the Beavers live, it's a snowy area. So half of the year we have to fight weather. I remember when we were doing the very closing scenes of the film, we got stuck. And this is picture, actually, believe it or not, we're not stuck in this picture yet. It gets worse and we get actually stuck. So we needed to film, so it's snowing really hard, so we just left the truck. We got the cameras out and we hiked down to the Beaver Lodge where we're going to film. And so we make some closing statements. I explain in closing that it's been over 16 years and I've never seen the Beavers out. So here I am looking at their lodge, and I'm trying to make the case, and I say that, it's not that they just stopped working. I never seen them come out of their lodge on Saturday. It's as if they go in there on Friday night and they hibernate for 24 hours. It's an amazing thing. I remember one time on Saturday afternoon, I had been there like 6 hours. Just like I said, it's very monotonous to watch this whole process on Saturday, but I want to be there in case they come out because I want this to be legitimate. I want to document. I was there observing most of the Sabbath, and I never saw them come out. I'm there. So I remember I'm there for 6 hours, and it's really not that boring to me, really. I say it's boring because you don't see any animals, but I enjoy just hearing the birds and stuff like that. And so after about 6 hours, all of a sudden, a beaver popped up out in the middle of the pond. He pops up, and it scared me. I thought, this is the guy that apostatized. It's ruined my film. And I quickly looked at my watch. It was 8:05. Sun was down. I just lost track of time, but it scared me. It was right about sundown. He popped up, and he's, I don't know what makes them do this. I have no idea. But the aim of our film really is to make the viewer ask some questions, ask themselves questions. What makes these guys rest? What's the significance of all this? And is there a message in there for me? So I see the Sabbath, and maybe many of you see the Sabbath, playing a significant role in end-time events. Does anybody see that? The Sabbath playing a key issue. For instance, you read in Revelation 13 and 14, a key issue in the mark of the beast issue. And we have Revelation seminars around the United States, all over the place. We see people accepting the Sabbath. They see this as a sign of God's covenant with man and a sign of his creative power. It's the celebration of creation, and people are accepting the Sabbath truth. And I know that Satan doesn't like that. And so one of his deceptions that I found out, and I get this question all the time, is this. Some people will say, now we can't know exactly which day the Sabbath is because there's been a calendar change. That's one of the most popular questions I hear in a Revelation ceremony. We do Q&A sessions, and that's one of the most popular questions. I remember getting that question from 91-year-old Charles in South Carolina. He said, since the calendar changes, we don't know which day the original Sabbath was. What can you tell me about that? And here was my answer. I wrote back to him. I said, Charles, you're right about the calendar being changed, but you're wrong about losing track of the true Sabbath. So we have evidence, scientific evidence, that bears record of this. Was there a calendar update? And did it affect the weekly cycle? How many of you recognize this building? Somebody said, that's the White House, isn't it? That's not the White House. That is a White House. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, the Naval Observatory. Boy, a well-educated group here. This is the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., and this is where time is set and coordinated for the whole planet, isn't it? This is why your iPhone, it sets its time from this building. This building coordinates time and keeps track of time. How do they keep track of time? Well, it's through the stars. A certain star, it'll cast its lights through a lens on a crosshair on a computer, and when that happens, when that goes across, as the observatory goes through there, and that beam comes across that crosshairs, it sets time for all Earth. Now, I showed Charles a letter that was, somebody asked the Naval Observatory the same question, and we share this over, and you've probably seen this. Here's a letter, and By the way, I don't know, maybe pastors will recognize Dr. F.D. Nichols was the person who wrote it. You know F.D. Nichols, editor for the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary. Anyway, he got this question a lot. Because of the calendar changes, did the calendar changes affect the weekly cycle in any way at all? And he says, we had occasion to investigate the results of the works of the specialist in chronology, and we have never found one of them that has ever had the slightest doubt about the continuity of the weekly cycle since long before the Christian era. That means long before the time of Christ. These people are the experts in chronologies. They keep track of time, and they can tell you exactly what day it is based on the stars. Was there a calendar change? Well, there was a couple. Here's how the calendar was changed. 1582 in October, they found out that they needed to drop 10 days off of the calendar. That's when we went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And you can see that October 4 on Thursday was followed by October 15, which is a Friday. So we lost 10 days on the calendar, but did we lose anything about the continuity of the weekly cycle? No. That's the Gregorian. And this is where, by the way, we get the leap years. We go into the Gregorian calendar, and then they found out about how we're losing time. And we needed leap years. That started in 1582 and 83. Then, of course, there was another change in 1752. You can see Wednesday, September 2 was followed by Thursday, September 14. But again, no change in the weekly cycle. Now, you see, these specialists in chronology, if you were to bop them over the head and put them in a coma and sit them in a room for a month or two, and then they came out of it, if you gave them a telescope and a computer or a calculator or whatever instrument they needed, they could tell you by looking at the stars what day it is or what day of the week it is. And they can go back in time and they can tell. In fact, here are some testimonies from some of these experts, and these are astronomers. Dr. Hinckley says, by calculating the eclipses, it can be proven that no time has been lost, and the creation days are 7, divided into 24 hours each. And then again, the human race never lost the septenary, or the 7-day sequence of days, and the Sabbath of these latter times comes down to us from Adam through the ages without a single lapse. These are scientific evidences that Saturday that we celebrate today is the same Sabbath of Adam and Eve, the same Sabbath that Jesus observed. And more astronomers, I can go on and on with astronomers who are experts in chronology. It can be said with assurance that not a day had been lost since creation, and all the calendar changes notwithstanding, there has been no break in the weekly cycle. And I got over and over, I don't want to bore you with all these, but the last one here, the continuity of the week has crossed the centuries, and all known calendars still intact. The Bible tells us in Genesis 1:14, what does it say? It says that God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days, and for years." Just like the Naval Observatory, they learned that from God. They set their clock, they set chronology, and they set time by the stars, which is amazing. Here's just a few pictures of some of the supporters of the Seventh-day Beaver film. Ed Reed, a dear friend. Now this guy, Ed Reed, some of you know Ed Reed. I forget his title, but he comes up, we have a booth somewhere, he'll come in and just clean us out of Seventh-day Beaver DVDs and start sharing them with everybody. I've met people that said, oh yeah, I got a Seventh-day Beaver DVD from Ed Reed. He's out there just promoting this. Ivor Myers, a good friend of our family. Eric Fleckinger from It Is Written. And there's the man that owns Safe TV. He says, man, we got to get some more films from you. He ministers to Native Americans, and they like nature, so he was really happy with this. Pastor Doug Batchelor, we met him at an ASI convention, and right away he signed a contract to air that documentary on his network. Vonda Bierman, who sings for us at our evangelistic crusades sometimes. Steve Saxon, friend of the family. Here's the Amish people, Naomi and Andy Weaver. They are big proponents of the Seventh-day Beaver film. And if you're interested, this is our website, desiremedia.org, Seventh-day Beavers. You can order that. And now let me just say one thing about the Seventh-day Beaver DVD. It's actually free. It's free for a donation of any amount. And what we're doing with donations is that we're funding our ministry work. We have free evangelism projects going on, free weekend seminars, like this one. And we have a free online Bible school. And this, Lord has really blessed us with this. We have given many, many thousand away, but there are people who actually donate for it. And that is a real blessing to our ministry because we live completely on donations. And our ministry is funded by the good Lord who has impressed people to support. So we've given away $1. Some people donate $1. Some people have donated $5, $10. A $20 donation does a lot of good. $50. I've even got $1,000 donations for these things. People who are impressed and want to support the ministry, $1,000. The film is airing on 3ABN, Light TV in Europe, in different languages, on Better Life TV, Good News TV in Arizona, Amazing Discoveries, Amazing Facts Television, Hope Channel. It's on David Gates' networks, who, by the way, he didn't get a license agreement. He just started airing it. I don't know how that happened, but and like I said, this is a really good fundraiser for us. It's been a blessing to us. And if you're interested in, we have a few here with us today. And like I said, they're free. If you don't have a donation, they're still free. Just take one. And we're happy. We're in ministry. We're not in business. But if you have a donation, you can just throw a donation. We have a box over there. You're welcome to put a donation in there, and we'll put that money to good use if the Lord impresses you to do that. Now, are there any questions? I wonder if I should ask if there's any questions. Anybody have anything that stirs up your pure imagination? I could say, let me just say something about the mice. While you're thinking of a question, let me just say, one of the people who approached me with information on circumseptum rhythm studies. You know what circumseptum means? That's 7-day biorhythms. There's actually scientists and researchers who study not circadian rhythms, but circumseptum rhythms, these 7-day biological rhythms. One of which was Dr. Crystal Witten, a neuroscientist. She studied the growth rate of mice neurons in mouse brains. This is what she was studying to get her PhD at a university in Texas. So this is her. Now, can you imagine how boring that would be? She's got an electron microscope, and she's looking inside the brain of a mouse, and she's measuring how fast the neurons grow in their brains. And she's writing it down. She's writing the little micro measurements, writing them down. She said that the growth rate was consistent Saturday night through Friday night, and then on Saturday, when Friday night, when the sun would go down, the growth rate accelerated. And it was significantly accelerated. It would go back to normal as soon as the sun would go down on Saturday. It would go back to normal, consistent all the way through till Friday night, and then it would accelerate, and then it would go back down to normal after the 24-hour Sabbath period was over. She documented that, and she's a neuroscientist. She told her professor that was the study that she was doing, and she wanted to present that to get her dissertation at the university in Texas. The professor said, if you use that material, you will not graduate from this university. And so what happened is that professor got sick right after this. He got sick and he was on leave of absence for 3 months, in which time she did the mouse brain study with the substitute professor and published her writings, and she came and told us about it. And we're trying to talk her into being on her new documentary, Animals That Rest on Sabbath. Can you imagine what an amazing scientific study that is? And the other significant part was that the university professor was threatening her that she wouldn't graduate if she used something that would promote intelligent design, right? Now, what are a lot of these universities, not Loma Linda, thank God, but what about all these public universities? A lot of their funding is coming from evolutionary study dollars, aren't they? I mean, isn't that true? This would really mess that up, wouldn't it? If you found out there was something that would point to a 7-day rhythm in an animal, a 7-day rhythm could only come from the book of Genesis, right? I mean, that's where it would come from. And evolution is so much at odds with the Bible. The evolutionary teaching is just at odds with the Bible, and that's what happened there. And you can, okay, then what about the Seventh-day Dog, the Adventist Dog? We've talked about that, but maybe you saw the documentary. That was about Gary Roberts, another supporter of the Seventh-day Beaver. He was a mission pilot there in, I think, Papua New Guinea. And he went out, well, he says the story was there was 2 missionaries out there who received a dream the same night. One was a pastor, one was a layperson, and they received a dream that they saw this village where people were asking them to come. Kind of like Paul's vision where they said, come over into Macedonia and help us. That happened. They saw the elders from this village both saying, and they had the same dream, the same night. They woke up, compared the dream, they said, well, God wants us to go. They went, they presented the gospel. Week after week they presented. When they made their appeals for people to make decisions for Jesus, nobody made a decision for Jesus. And they were puzzled by that. They went back home and they couldn't understand. They prayed about it. They wondered what happened. A few weeks later, some of the elders in that village approached them. And they said, they brought this dog with them. And this dog, his name is Dolby. They brought their dog and said, we want you to come back. Our dog Dolby, who used to be our chief hunting dog, he will not hunt with us on Saturday anymore. You know what he does on Saturday? He goes right to where you're holding those meetings, and he sits there from Friday night sundown till Saturday night sundown. He stays right there, and he won't hunt. And not only that, he doesn't eat pork anymore. Can you believe that? I mean, if that isn't Adventisty, I don't know what isn't. But that's Adventisty. You know, he wouldn't eat pork. So they said, we want you to come back. And they came back. It's because of that dog, they were convinced that God was calling those missionaries back. And they did their Bible studies, and they had a whole village converted. And so, you know, I think God is using it. Any questions? Awful quiet out there. Make up a question. I can tell you about that Pepsi elephant. You want to hear about that? Okay, I'm holding a booth out there, and I don't know which state I was in, but a guy came up to me, and he said that he had a connection with an elephant trainer. Elephant trainer had an elephant that was used for commercials and for stunts and for circuses and all those kind of things. Pepsi approached him, and they wanted to do a commercial for Pepsi. And it said that it's going to take us 4 days to shoot the commercial. We're going to hire your elephant. He said, well, if it's going to take 4 days, you better not come after Tuesday because my elephant won't do anything on Saturdays. Elephant won't do a thing. He'll do all the tricks that you need him to do, stand on one foot, balance the ball, ride the man on the back. On Saturday, forget it. He says he is resting on Saturday. And so Pepsi came out, they had to come on, they came out on a Tuesday or Monday, and they shot the commercial and got this apparently Sabbath-keeping elephant on a Pepsi commercial. Well, we got a few DVDs with us if you're interested, and there's no questions. You know, that was easy. You guys let me off the hook easy. Oh, question. That's a good question. You know, that's a good question. If there is a study to be done, I think they ought to have you in on the study because you're the one. You know, I haven't heard that. Well, Pastor Mark needs to pile those Seventh-day Beaver DVDs and ask them questions. And just when if they go to sleep, they miss out. Yeah. I never even thought to do that. That would be a good study. We ought to suggest that to Neil Nedley. He probably has done some research on that. But hey, I'm going to write that down. That is a good. I'm learning something. So, yeah, that's. Yeah, that's right. Now, they've done studies where they found out that quality of sleep is doubled before midnight hours, right? You've heard that study. And it's like if you go to... Right. Yeah, so you go to sleep after you late, like I go to bed early, so that works out good for me. My wife is kind of goes to bed late and gets up late. She doesn't know what a sunrise looks like, really. That's right, yeah. She's good about that. In fact, she would love to go to Hawaii. And she says, let's get out of the snow. But so maybe that's what it is. She's on this other rhythm. But that's a good idea for a study. Any other questions? Yes. Well, they're amazing. I mean, this is, you know, I was baptized after going to an evangelistic series, and it just really moved me. You know, it just gets you in this whole idea of studying the Bible, and the whole atmosphere is just amazing. So I loved being in that atmosphere, and so I like to create an atmosphere for the guests that are coming. And so, you know, I have two more. I've got one in Lockford, California, and one in Eagle Point, Oregon, to do. And I've been to Eagle Point, Oregon. Our last seminar, we had 18 decisions for baptism there, but many more Bible study interests. And, you know, I don't know how they go good. In fact, even if someone doesn't make a decision for baptism, they go away with the knowledge that the gospel was presented to them. And the church feeling satisfied that they presented the gospel to the community. They were the light to the community. Even though not the whole community made a decision for Jesus, they had the opportunity, and that's important. You see that in the story of Noah. Noah preaches to the whole world. Nobody gets on the boat, right? But he presented the gospel to the world. The world had an opportunity. And, you know, it's sad when someone doesn't make a decision for Jesus at a Revelation seminar, and we kind of go away disappointed sometimes, don't we, Pastor? Well, we have an evangelistic series, and we're going, man, that wasn't enough. But at least the church had the opportunity to present the gospel light to the whole community, and the whole community had that opportunity. And that at least is encouraging in a way. So our seminars, I mean, they go really well. I have a 10-day seminar now. I've condensed my 1 month down into 10-day. Some people still like the 1 month, but I like the 10-day because I can not be away on the road for so long. But we have condensed the whole. I do every night except on Sabbath. We do 2 nights or two presentations. But in fact, this whole presentation series, Animals and People That Rest, that's a week of prayer. It's an 8-part presentation series, but I have it condensed into a weekend. And if you want to have us back sometimes, I'd love to come back and share some of those messages. You know, that we have, I think I've maybe share with Pastor Kristen some of the titles on that. And it's a real encouragement. We have one called Famous Adventists, where we look at all the different people that are notable in Adventism, and then we kind of compare the unique doctrines, the uniqueness of the Seventh-day Adventist doctrines, and how they, and the thing that piques the interest of the community is Famous Adventists? Really? You know, there are a few notable Adventists, like, you know, Ben Carson and Barry Black, and, you know, a few different people like that. And Little Richard, he was an evangelist in his later years. In fact, he's still at it. He still rides around his limousine. He lives in Manchester, or not Shelbyville, but right there outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and he gets in his limousine, and he'll go around with the Steps to Christ. Little Richard's limousine pulls up to somebody, window goes down, and he says, "Excuse me, would you like a book? I'd like to share this book with you, Steps to Christ." And he's had good results, people coming into the church because of Little Richard's sharing with him. And so there are a number of notable Adventists. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brother Cole. A couple of years ago, I was asked by Mesa Grande Academy to lead a week of prayer, and I asked the Lord what topic would best click with these kids, and the topic was knowing God through animals, because there are animals in the Bible that God used in order to convey a message, such as a donkey, a whale, cows, and so on and so forth. I see that evidence through the ministry that you presented to us. God is still using animals in as insignificant as these rodents, or whichever category the beavers are, they're rodents, right, to convey a message that is so eternal, so powerful. And while listening to your presentation, the verse from Psalm 139, verse 14 came to mind, which says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful. I know that full well." I believe you could say that you know that full well after observing these animals for years on end, and hours after hours after hours, investing that kind of time in order to bring to us and many others a summary of your observations is so valuable. I think it was worth every minute, every penny that you've invested in it. I highly encourage anyone who would be willing to utilize this material as a form of outreach to heed the advice that Brother Cole had shared with us. There are DVDs here. Any kind of support obviously will continue to help this kind of production for the future. I cannot wait to see the second, the 2.0 version of this, animals that rest on
Yeah, it would
Sabbath.
include the mouse brain study, some of the bees in Brazil, a number of other animals. You know, there's a number of other researchers doing circuseptum rhythm studies.
Yes.
I mean, these are doctors. We had another supporter named Dr. Greenaway. I think he was in South America somewhere, and he was supporting. And he's doing some kind of study. I'm not sure exactly what study, but it had something to do with biorhythms.
I see.
And I'm going to try to we can contact him and see what he's been up to. But
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you so much once again. I invite you for a word of prayer as we conclude tonight's presentation. Lord, I thank you so much for the beauty of your creation, the wisdom that derives from just simple observations, just stopping, disconnecting from this busy rhythm that the world is engaged in, and just taking a simple look at what's happening around us with animals, plants, everything that surrounds us. So we praise you for this revelation that was brought to us by our brother Larren Cole. I pray that you will continue to guide him in his ministry, bless his family, his children, those who study here with us, those who continue their journey in life in the pathways that you've laid before them. We thank you and we praise you for being such a wonderful God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.